Good afternoon, and thank you for joining INSA's Wednesday Wisdom. Before we begin, we have a brief video from our sponsor.
Hi, I'm Scott McIntyre, and I'd like to briefly introduce Guidehouse. Our mission focuses on solving big problems, building trust in society, and improving the quality of life. And we do this across our commercial and public sector businesses in healthcare, public sector financial services, and within our energy, sustainability, and infrastructure business, or ESI.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our Wednesday Wisdom Speaker Series program. I am thrilled to welcome one of our amazing women of the IC to our program today, the Honorable Sue Gordon. Sue is a national security treasure, and I am looking forward to what I think will be a fascinating conversation. We have a lot to cover, so I will quickly run through the housekeeping notes. We want the program to be as interactive as possible, so I hope you are ready to participate. You can submit questions through the Q&A box on the right side of your screen. We have more than 500 attendees today, so please be patient and we will do our best to get to your questions. We're pleased to welcome members of the press to the call today as well. So this is a reminder that this program is on the record. And finally, I would like to thank our sponsor, Guidehouse, for their critical support of this program. We could not deliver this kind of expert insight without the support of our partners. I am pleased to welcome Tracy Pratt, a partner and leader of the National Security Practice for Guidehouse, who will introduce our speaker. Tracy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tish. Guidehouse is really passionate about the work that we do in the intelligence community to help our clients tackle their most complex challenges. And events like today, where we come together to engage in thoughtful dialogue around some of our community's most pressing issues, really help advance that mission. I'd really like to thank INSA for hosting this program and helping to keep our community connected, most especially during this crazy time. And now it's my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker today, the Honorable Sue Gordon. She's the former Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence. Serving as the country's second highest intelligence official, she led the effort to better integrate the IC and meet new challenges and opportunities. Her more than 3 decades of public service, which included senior leadership roles at NGA and CIA, were marked with a deep commitment to partnerships, innovation, and most importantly, the workforce. So a big, big welcome to Sue. And as always with Sue, I'm sure we're all really looking forward to the discussion today. So with that, let me send it back over to you, Tish.
Thanks, Tracy. And again, thanks to the entire Guidehouse team for your support. Now, to kick things off, we're just going to get straight into this. So, Sue, talk to us about the moment that we find ourselves in and what might be the new normal when we get to the other side. Can't hear you.
Here we go. Thanks, Tish. Thanks, Tracy. I've got a big smile on my face. One of the horrifying things about this is you see yourself in the camera, and I'm thinking, why are you smiling so much? And I know why I was, is every accolade that you two ascribe to me, I'm thinking, no. That's how I think of you two, national treasure. Tish, I've known you forever, and Tracy has been a partner of mine for more than a decade, so I'm honored to be here. Thanks. And one thing before I get going, I hope everyone who's listening, that you and everyone you love are happy and healthy and finding your way. Yeah, what a great moment. I think these are extraordinary times. And even before the COVID pandemic, I think we knew that we were in change times. The digital world had changed everything. And I don't think we had totally adjusted to a world where every technology is available to everyone, where we're digitally connected in ways that obliterate physical boundaries, and Instead of being a world where we needed to hunt for data, we're living in a world of data abundance where you know that the world knows everything. We just can't find the wisdom that is in that data. I think threats changed. The nature of partnerships changed, the nature of geopolitics changed, certainly who was responsible for leadership changed in the digital world, the speed at which we had to decide the data that we used to be able to see the patterns, the technology that was really going to carry us to the future, all of that was changing the digital world. And when I say we were limping to the future in a Kodak kind of way, it's like we were investing in the things that were necessary to thrive in that world, but I don't know that we had committed to it. And just one look at it was we were still dragging the Cold War and the global war on terror with us. And as we tried to adjust to what a minute ago was the great power competition, we were struggling to find the resources to do all those things we'd done in the past and do the new things, which were economic and trade and competition and cyber, and not just cyber, the technology part of it, but the reality that all elements of our adversaries and competitors' interests are being affected through the digital world. So we kind of were seeing it. We were investing in the things we needed. We were investing in digital technologies, but I would say we weren't committing to it. We were still thinking that those things were new and we would do them as our resources allowed rather than do them as the problems needed. And then the pandemic hit. And I think that we saw some things with COVID that put some physical reality around those parameters we had seen with the digital world. Number one, national security was instantaneously much bigger than, these are Sue Gordon's words, the Soviet military power, right? And the things that with it. National security was immigration and pandemics and climate. And so all of a sudden we see that it wasn't enough that we didn't have good insight into these things or we didn't have good contributions. They were actually affecting national security in really profound ways. We saw that intelligence is absolutely necessary. For anyone who wonders whether you still need intelligence and whether the intelligence community is relevant, holy smokes, COVID certainly proved it was necessary. You needed objective wisdom, knowledge before events unfolded more than ever. But what we see is that what we had wasn't sufficient to be able to prepare us to see these kinds of threats coming. And again, I think it's the global interactive things. I think what it's taught us is we need to learn to be able to operate at distance and operate securely. Heck, secure mobility is something that we've been talking about in the intelligence community for at least a decade.
At least.
But I got to tell you, when this hit, the national security and the classified community was struggling more than most to be able to continue to do its work because we have a different model for how we protect vital information, and it wasn't conducive to operate at distance. And yet, I think if we're not recognizing that this is a world where you must be able to work where you are, we're not recognizing it. And then I think the last thing that COVID showed is that we had actually been living in a pretty abundant, pretty peaceful time where we could all take advantage of all the things that were available, but none of us were really responsible for the consequence of using the things that we did. I think we see this in supply chain in 5G, where we were making infinitely reasonable decisions about what we invested in. Heck, the government had a downturn in R&D investment because the private sector was doing such a good job investing in the technologies that we needed. What we now see is, but they weren't investing in some of the things that are really the foundational things to allow us to go forward. So what you're seeing is that we were all making decisions of what was available and none of us were taking responsibility for the things that we had. And the other thing that I think COVID taught us was that we are all making decisions for each other. And so this changes, to me, not only national security and intelligence and leadership and technology and education, But if you talk specifically about how it affects intelligence, I think it affects what your priorities are. I think it affects what we collect, what kind of collectors we build, what kind of information we think is relevant to us. I mean, I think there are, if you look at some of the bigger challenges I mentioned, that isn't where we spend a lot of money investing in collection. And so we aren't the ones that are most dominant in some of these threats. And I think you're going to look at a change in that. I think we have to change our analytic tradecraft. It has to better integrate.
In what way?
I think it has to better integrate technical with geopolitical. If you look at it today, you still have technologists, we'll choose cyber as a great example, during cyber analysis of the act that's being committed through the digital environment, not thinking about, holy smokes, the same lifelong imperatives of our adversaries are now being affected differently. And if you don't know those two things, then the social scientists aren't technically aware, and if the technologists aren't geopolitically aware, you're going to miss some trends. I think it'll change how we share data. You're not going to be able to just share data when you know you need to share data, because it's the data that everyone has that is going to allow them to put together the picture. It will change the speed at which we operate. It must change our investment in digital technologies and data analytics and AI. I don't know how you could have an intelligence community that wasn't the leader in the application of data sciences. I just don't know how that's true. So we got to get on our horses, and I think you can just go from there. So here's what I know, and here's where I hope we depart on this conversation. I know that this is a moment of great opportunity. All adversity always is.
Always presents.
Always. I know that the successful people, organizations now are the ones who are going to build to the future, not recover to the past. And I know that there's no call from the governor coming. In other words, there's going to be no proclamation from the top that says, okay, this is what we're going to have to do. And instantaneously, everyone's going to know that change and leadership and innovation and becoming new is going to have to happen at every level. So I hope what we talk about today is kind of explore some of those ideas about a practical guide to becoming new.
A practical guide to becoming new. Okay, so let's take a walk from there. You have been a very successful innovator. Some would say a serial innovator, a revolutionary. I mean, in a number of your positions, Sue, you know, you were the first and the first to do a number of things. So put yourself in some of those roles if you think back over your career, and what would you be doing now? How would you approach things, and how might you approach them differently, given all of the things that you just touched on?
Yeah, damn you, that's a great question. I'll take a couple of global statements. So if I've been successful, it's because I always ruthlessly see the moment for what it is. I look at where we are. And what I mean by ruthlessly is I don't try and wish that it were some other way, right? Whatever condition we have is the one we have. And then the second is, all right, how am I going to succeed in that? And so when you talked about the roles, so how am I going to succeed in that individually? How am I going to succeed in that if I lead a unit or an organization? And then we'll take the last one, how am I going to succeed if I have something like an intelligence community? And I think they've all got similar elements, but how you do it. So let's talk about an individual. The first thing I would say is I encourage everyone to remember your first day when you got a job, and how excited you were that anyone would pay you anything to do whatever they wanted. You were not persnickety about what you did. You were just so excited to have a job that you were happy to do what you could for the cause. first thing at a time of change, remember that emotion, because it's so true that we get wedded to what we're doing now, and we think that what we're doing now is what we're supposed to be doing, or that I'm going to hold on to that. So the first thing as an individual is just remember that though you have skills and you have things you bring and you have opinions about it, when you're in an organization or part of the national security community, your role is to serve that mission, not to hold on to either what you've been or what you prefer. And I think those two mindset things are really important. And then the third thing I do as an individual is I try and take the reality of the moment and create a vision for myself. A lot of people wait to be told what to do. I will tell you that in a time of change, if you wait for something to be issued from the top, it's going to be not exactly what you need and a little bit far away from your actions. So go ahead and play along with the moment. You know better than anyone else what it is you do. You know better than anyone else the limitations of what you do. If you take a pretty clear-eyed view of the moment and you then say, okay, given this, how's it going to work? Do I have that? You start with, do I have the skills I need? Could the job that I'm doing be not necessary? Could the job that I'm doing need to be done differently? So as an individual, I try and free myself from the natural acquisition of opinion about what it is that I do and what I don't do, what I'm willing to do and I'm not. And I try and throw myself into the moment, figuring that it's going to come. And the reason I say start there as an individual is guidance will come. But if you're selfish about yourself and what you have, it is going to be really hard for the top to overcome your selfishness because they rely on you. They don't know what you know. And if you're resistant and you're saying, yeah, I'm not going to do it, or no, we got to hold on to this. And that doesn't mean everything always changes. I'm just saying, first consider the moment, establish your own vision, and then put yourself into it and say, okay, given what I'm doing and given my responsibility, how do I fit? So that's kind of as an individual. And I think I've done it. Weirdly, when we talk about In-Q-Tel, at the moment the task was given me to find a different way to reach out to Silicon Valley, I was actually the director of advanced analytic tools, which was an office that I built to do exactly what we were about to undo with the formation of In-Q-Tel, because as much as the office was just being built and had a good theory, the reality was the task, when I was given the task, you were faced with the empirical knowledge that what we were doing wasn't enough and we had to do it a different way. So then you take the task on honestly without worrying about whether it was going to get rid of the office that I had just built. So I think you do that by taking on a task, believing you're supposed to do it, and then establishing your own vision, pursuing it honestly without protecting what you were, and then put yourself back into it at the end. So that's the individual. As a unit leader is actually the most powerful entity within the intelligence community in most organizations. Most budgets are built up from what the units say, and
yeah, that first line supervisor.
They are, right? And so if that person is holding on and saying nothing can be done differently, you're going to have a hard time. The top is going to have a hard time overcoming expertise. If the expertise says you can't change, the top is going to have a hard time changing. Now it may get there. So as a unit leader, now you have two responsibilities, right? You got to understand where your boss wants to go. You got to translate their intent into what makes sense based on your expertise. And then you got to bring your pups along and then translate it into, okay, here's what we're going to do, and communicate a lot. So it's the same thing as an individual, establishing vision, and then the pups. The organization thing, if I imagine myself as the principal deputy director of now, we were on a path to be able to deal with great power competition, and the community was doing a really good job of trying to talk at the top level, both where we needed to go and what we each needed from each other and what more we needed from themselves. but I think we were still holding on a bit. And so at the very top of organizations, I think this is one where you're going to have to launch efforts to, and this is big, stop doing things. And my experience is you can't issue the tasking to say, what's the bottom 10% of what we're doing? I've never been successful in that task. Everything we're doing is important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing that. I've always believed it. But what you can do is say, this is now the most important things. Build me programs to accomplish these, not just put money against them. And then you will find the bottom when you find the money. So the top is, it's going to do less of the work, but it's going to set more of the parameters. And so you just have to, as you work up, you got to know what your role is, but it all requires, before the direction is in evidence, you have to see the moment clearly and then understand how that ripples into what you're doing.
Yeah.
That was a really hard question. I hope I helped.
Well, it was a really great answer, and you put it in several different perspectives, which is what I was hoping you would do, so that I'm sure we have a very diverse audience. So I think a lot of different people could take different nuggets away. Sue, we have a ton of questions rolling in. I'm going to tie a couple together with a couple things you said in your opening remarks. I know you're ready. So you talked about operating at a distance. And you talked about, you know, if we're going to be successful, if anyone is going to be successful, you're going to build to the future and not recover to the past. So taking a couple of questions here, putting them together, because also I wanted you to, you know, elaborate on those. Greg Torres from Booz Allen.
Hey, Greg.
Says, knowing that the cleared community needs to have the ability to work more remotely, that operate at a distance, what argument do you think will be enough to push the IC to provide the technology and procedures, I would throw policy in there, that would allow us to really literally work dispersed and at home rather than only in a skiff? Particularly, I mean, look, I mean, I heard Sue Calwaite say the other night, 85% of her workforce is working from home.
Yeah.
And they're working.
Go Geo and Services. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and they're working, and so is everyone else's workforce. So there's that, and then we're getting a lot around telework, using more open source material. So how do we build to the future and not recover to the past, which is easy. It's easy to go back to what we were doing.
Right. And when I say build to the future, I'm going to say if you know, we haven't felt the budget implications of this yet, right? We just nationally, we haven't gotten to that yet. I will say you can build to smaller, you can build to different, you can build to, so when I say build, don't think that if your work unit is going to be dramatically changed, that's any less a building action than a reduction. So the mindset of build, I think, is really important, is you're going somewhere. Even if where you're going is smaller or less or different, you're still going. So a couple tricks. And forgive me on the word tricks. I think we're going to have to do this, is we're going to have to really think about our model. So our model has been by and large, an all-in model, right? Our environment is an all-in model, right? We achieved integration because we were all in. We were able to build a system where it was system high and we had ways to get in there. I think we're going to have to think about that model because, number one, open source information is so incredibly useful. And then two, from a classification perspective, we have, because of that model, we have bundled a lot of piece parts into the complete picture that actually can be parsed out. So number one is, I think, the model of, can you separate pieces and not have to all do them in the same environment? You know, can you have people working home, I think is one. The second thing is a risk model. This is way a disservice to anyone who's in the security field, but I will tell you, it feels like we are still thinking that one loss is unacceptable. Right back in the InQtel days, one of the reasons why our investment in security was so important is because the banking community could make a decision about how much loss they have. And when we had a zero loss model and that was instantiated commercially, then security increased. But realistically in this world, I don't know that a zero loss model is what we're operating in right now. So taking a real hard look at what you have to protect. One of my starting points is you have to protect, you can't lose it all, and you can't lose the 5 things that are the most important. And then other than that, you can do risk. And does that open up some space in order to find some technical solutions that allow you to? And definitionally, what you just said, Tish, it did, because we've had people working at home when we would have never considered that before. And then the last one is just a mindset change, and that is come up with a reason why you can't telework and you can't do it at a lower level, rather than starting from you have to prove that it's okay if you do. And I think we're going to have to do that. I'm not a dilettante about protecting important information. Listen, we are in the intelligence community entrusted by the American people with some really special stuff, and we still have to protect it. But I do think as we've grown, that model needs to shift, and we can look at it some different ways. And the last thing is, I think we're going to see a huge, I mentioned technology, and this is where my industrial partners are. I think now that we all know we have to operate at distance, and we've seen that there are still bad guys out there, and in case anyone wondered, there are bad guys out there.
Yeah.
Right? That we're still going to have to protect, but I think you're going to see a renaissance in the kind of technologies that allow us to do and, not or. And I think when I talk about the responsibility of the government to invest in some things, I think now is the time that we're going to have to solve privacy and security, distance and security. We're going to have to start solving some of the and problems.
So you just mentioned our industrial partners. Mm-hmm. So do you see the role of industry changing going forward? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sorry, I thought that was enough. Hey, you gotta have fun. Yeah, they'll never let us do this again, Tish. Stay focused, Sue.
I know, lots of questions. I think people are enjoying this, Sue.
Yeah. So the world, according to Sue Gordon, is when it became digital, the traditional boundaries were obliterated, and who the decision makers were changed. If you don't think that our industrial partners are making decisions about national security, you don't have your head up. They make decisions about national security when they decide what part of the telecommunications chain they want to participate in and what they will send offshore. They make choices for national security when they decide that they don't want to be in the low profit parts of a supply chain. Instead, they want to be in the high profit. And they're making decisions for national security when they do and don't protect themselves, not understanding that they're part of the threat surface that our adversaries will go against. And that sounds way more negative than I mean. What I mean is there are a huge part. Oh, and just technologically, you know, back in the day when I started, the government was the one that thought of the really special technologies, and we knew how to protect them. Now the special technologies are being developed in the wild, and somehow we're trying to protect them after. And so that's not going to work. So when I say that they are responsible, not solely, but they are decision makers, and they are part of the threat surface, and a model where the government can protect them and or regulation will be enough is not going to carry the day at speed, because we need the US to be technical leaders. We need them. We need them to participate in the world. We need them to be aggressive. We don't want to rein them in, and we need to be secure. So that's what I think they need to do. I think it's really exciting to think about it. And again, I think they've seen it too. You think our industrial partners aren't thinking supply chain differently than they were thinking about it 3 months ago and how they do it? Now, that's all fun and games. I've just put all the pressure on our industrial partners. I would say the government needs to behave differently toward them. If I go to my combat support agency training, thanks NGA, because I don't think I could have said this before, I think you've got a government that's got to become the supporting command. We're going to have to think differently about the information that we share with them, how we talk about the threats that we see, what we make available in terms of understanding outside the classified community, because, you know, if decisions about national security are being made outside the classified community, is it comforting to say I've shared information with the classified community? And so I think that's gonna change time. The government's gonna have to partner differently. And I don't know that we have really known what we meant with public-private partnerships. So I tend to talk more in terms of shared responsibility and how do we affect that.
So perfect lead in to the next question. I would just add one thing, which you sort of said this, but maybe not as directly, that, you know, industry is also, they're making the decision on what they're investing in their internal R&D.
Right.
And so, again, you think back when we started, Sue, government had the corner on that market. They were doing all of the investing in R&D. That is not the case anymore. And industry,
I think you're going to see a resurgence of that. I think the government's going to have to get back into the business of foundational research.
Well, I hope so. I think part of it is certainly going to be what's the budget going to look like as we emerge from this. But speaking of the public-private partnerships, Suzanne Kelly from the Cipher Brief.
Hey, Suzanne.
Good friend of ours.
Brilliant woman. One of my faves.
Indeed she is. And she says, Sue, you've spoken a lot about the importance of public-private partnerships or public-private relationships and how important they are for the future of national security. Should the IC consider a program like the military is doing with job exchange programs?
Yeah.
And will that help us move the needle on innovation at the same time? And I know, you know, we were just starting to do a little bit of that when I was at NGA. You and Robert took it to the next level. Is it continuing? Is it across?
Into the category of we're still dabbling. So Suzanne, thanks for the question, and love the Cipher Brief. It's my go-to nonpartisan morning read. What do I think? Two reasons why we have to, three reasons, maybe four reasons, who knows, we'll get there when I count them up, why I think we have to. Number one is we have plenty of talent, but not if we each go get all the talent for ourselves. Two, careers are not 40 years in one place anymore. I don't care whether you're a company or whether you're the government, it's not 41 years in one place anymore. Two, I think what we've learned is the value of different perspective. I'm certainly learning that in just the 9 months I've been out. I wish I knew all the things that I've learned in these 9 months about how my partners felt about some of the things we were doing, so share that. And I think we just come up with a model where people can't, not only a model, but the processes that people can move in and out. I think we're going to have to look at some of the legal strictures around what is volunteerism. Can our partners volunteer, offer services to the government? Mm-hmm. Can we choose to send someone to company A without disadvantaging company B? I think there's some clever things that we could do in terms of funding academic scholarships before anyone joins, to say, here's the national security community. We're going to invest in you. We're going to give you a clearance with time being zero. And then we don't care if you come to work for a company or for the federal government. What we want you to do is participate in national security. And what you do is you get people who both understand purpose and also the ability to produce something that works. So I think it's a time that's well overdue. I don't see any reason why we couldn't. But I do think so here's the quotable Sue today. You cannot get to the future from the present. If you have to carry everything with you forward that you do today, you cannot do it differently. So what I advocate is this moment is so iconic that think about what we need and then build to that. You know, JFK said that we're going to put a man on the moon and return him to Earth safely by the end of the decade. had no idea how that was going to happen, but set the bar and then said, okay, let's build off the things that we need to do. I think that's what we need to commit to, and use the moment to drive us to change our habits, because most of the policies and some of the statutes that impede us are actually just how we prefer to do things, not the way we have to do things. So I think it's the whole thing. Get Congress involved. I know that they're in their own special place right now, but I think with some of the, I think they can be an organizing function between institutions if they would say, yeah, this is something we need to do. So really important, great question. Sorry, I was rambling, but it's one of my favorites. And I think we could do it. Like I think it's going to be harder to figure out how to share data before crisis than it is to figure out how we share humans over the course of their career and allow them to move back and forth between partners who are involved in the same quest. I have to believe that the one that Suzanne asked about is one of the easiest things for us to do.
Oh, it's easy to do,
I
but
do.
think of the number of mindsets that have to change. Just your point on scholarships before they come to work, and oh, by the way, you can work in industry instead of for the government, and that still counts.
Yeah.
Oh, that's got to be some pretty expansive thinking and really forward thinking.
Yeah. So if I have a worry, it's probably around that point. I think as I watched the daily COVID briefings, what the inimitable Jim Gordon is laughing at me in the background. I'm really sorry. The biggest thing I took away was the simultaneous need for government and the insufficiency of government. Like it was apparent that we needed institutions, we need bureaucracies to provide the foundation and the constancy and the commonality. But how we prosecute government right now in terms of how rules-based it is, how fixed it is in the way we're doing things, is impeding us from getting there. So you saw some things being done wonderfully by innovation in the private sector, and then you saw that what they developed wasn't sufficient to scale. And so I think the government's going to have to do this. And if I have a worry, it's who are the governmental leaders who are going to be big enough and have broad enough responsibility to reimagine education and lead the Department of Education to be the one that opens up the space, because that's what government does. Government does big purpose, longer horizons, and create room. And I worry, I said in my opening soliloquy that this is all about leadership. It's going to be who are the leaders that come into it. But I still say you don't have to wait for that miracle in order to do some really amazing things at local level and individual level.
Yeah. I'm going to come back to that at the very end. So Sue, there really are way more questions than we're ever going to get to.
So let's tweet the answers.
How about, well, that, and let's try and do a lightning round.
Okay.
We've only got about 7-8 minutes left.
Okay.
I already know what my last question is, but here's one from Amelia at NGA.
Hi, Amelia.
What are the, hey, it's home week, old home week. What are the responsibilities of leaders at all levels to support their people during this time and as we reimagine the future? Lightning round.
Yeah, so if everyone hasn't learned that our personal and professional lives are intertwined, they didn't have their eyes open. So going forward, the whole person, right? Every aspect of it, period. You fail if you don't.
Okay. How concerned are you, and this is coming from Teresa Fernandez, Department of the Navy. How concerned are you in Americans' loss of trust in news sources, and that many question whether facts are even knowable?
Yeah, so we didn't get into this, but I think truth and trust are the two foundations of free and open societies, and if we don't use some of our technological cycles to address those two, I think we'll be lost. But more than that, even before technology answers, y'all, let's get back to some critical thinking. Quit being guppies at the top of a fishbowl being fed, and actually think about what you're hearing. Don't listen to what people tell you it means. Actually do some work. But the combination of technologies on truth and trust and better critical thinking will get us there.
Good one. I don't know who this is from. Oh, I'm sorry. It's from Kelly Holgate.
Pretty good on speed right now. I'm just going to say, I never do this.
Yeah, no, this is good. How can we improve our international sharing? Seems like the future will be even more about allies and partners, and we have to improve that trust.
Yeah, so on a macro level, I think we're going to have to go to agreeing with some first principle and values and allowing things to be implemented differently. That's really hard for us. We've had such a position of dominance that we can not only dictate what we do, but how we get it done. I think the future of partnership is going to be, can we agree that this is a good thing to do, and then trust the locality to be able to do it as their nation needs or their locality needs. On the sharing piece, I think it flows from that. And again, I think the big tussle is going to be with privacy and all our different laws and the general fear that people sovereign data can be searched by somebody else if they put it in a third party's location. And so the biggest worry I have is how are we going to resolve the issue of data sovereignty and privacy?
Yeah, which we've been struggling with. Former INSA intern and current NGA employee. A new D&I nominee just went before the Senate. Should he be confirmed, what do you think should be Senator Ratcliffe's #1 priority?
I think I listed in the order I do. I'd sort out well, first I'd introduce himself. I'd get to know the community. I'd demonstrate that you understand the craft, not just the intelligence, but the craft of intelligence. That'll be important. Then start working it down. What are the priorities? How are we positioned in collection? Is the budget supporting that? Do we need analytic tradecraft? And I just start working down those issues, but would start with introducing who he is, demonstrating that he understands how arcane intelligence is, and that he can both explain the intelligence and then the limitations of it, and then go from there.
And as you entered the PD&I job, we of course knew you. You didn't have to introduce yourself, but you did. You already knew how arcane the art of intelligence is.
And I mean that in a loving sense. That wasn't a negative. It's just special.
No. And then those priorities that you just listed for him, those are the things you focused on, Sue.
Yep.
So they kind of transcend time.
Yeah, I think one of the things, formers are annoying. We served our turn, and I'm really hesitant to go back and say what someone else should do, because to hell, if it should have been done, why didn't I do it? But if we'll say that I didn't quite get to finish out my job jar, I think some of the things that were in it are still there. What's different is I would have really wrestled with a priority and looked at some of these big international slow-moving things. I say immigration, climate, pandemic, because I think they are security issues. And then I think that would have driven me. And even how we talk about great power competition, we still talk it about in terms of China and Russia. And I'm not sure that the country itself is the issue, or rather the impact and their actions geopolitically. So, if I look at my job jar, some of them are the same, but I really would be looking at how we drive intelligence to be a bigger player in some of these bigger geopolitical threats.
Good segue. Marcel Lettre
would like
to know if you could pick just one major problem the IC needs to focus on solving, what would that be?
I'd probably choose any of those three, Marcel, because I think they have some attributes that would get us there. One is, how do you look at non-traditional data? How do you look at massive amounts of data to find patterns in advance of crises? And I do it so how can you provide the craft? We sometimes think intelligence is the special information we have. Intelligence is really the craft of dealing with uncertain information with certainty, and being able to present an objective view of what is in the face of everyone else who presents what they would prefer it to be. So I'd take on some of these things that are in the forefront of security issues that are non-traditional, and I'd figure out, okay, what would we have to collect? How would we have to analyze? What data would we have to use? Where would we have to be located? And take a chance of reimagining what we do rather than trying to build from what we were. So I'd choose a couple of those. That's the first thing I do. And then the second thing is I'd make cyber a real boy, not the purview of technical people who are finding intrusions, but actually thinking about how digital connectedness changes the way national interests are manifest, from criminals to despots are using that environment. And we got to think about how it affects things.
Well said, Sue. And we are out of time. However, chair's prerogative. I'm going to ask you one last question and then give it to you for a wrap. And this is from Kenzie Leach. You may know Kenzie from NGA. How is PD D&I Gordon coping without sports?
Oh, it's awful. She's not. She's working more, which is awful. It was never the thing I should do. However, I have declared that Duke would have won the national championship, so I say they have 6, not 5.
There you go. Sue, before I wrap up, anything you'd like to say? Anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, what I would say is I'm optimistic, and if you can muster that in the midst of all the trouble, all the strife, all the suffering, all the humanity and the compassion that we ought to show, this is a moment of great change. We have seen it before. If you're as old as I am, global thermonuclear war seemed like, how in the world are we going to get around it? And it never happened. 9/11, on that day, I remember thinking, oh my God, we're never going to fly again. We're never going to trust again. We're under attack. And yet we found a way around that. This is another one of those moments. It's not quite as discreet, but my God, it's big. And I think if we jump into it as we've jumped into the past, believe that we must, as we always believe that we have, that we'll find our way.
We will indeed. And Sue, thank you so much for sharing this time with us and sharing your wisdom on this Wednesday afternoon. For all of you watching online, thank you for taking the time to join us. And of course, thank you to Guidehouse for supporting this program. When the webinar ends, there will be a short survey that pops up. Please answer it. We value your feedback. It'll make these programs better. And we look forward to seeing you next week. On Tuesday, we will talk with Julianne Galina, and on Wednesday, we welcome Bill Evanina to our program. This concludes the program. Stay safe, stay healthy, believe in America, and it's after 5. Have a great evening, everyone. Stay safe out here. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Tish.